Hi everyone, this is Ramanuj from LawSikho. Welcome to today's session. We are going to talk about major decisions by Indian courts on Corona. And with me, I have Sabyasachi, who's our
This
today's
is
guest.
Sabyasachi.
Hi Sabyasachi, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about...
I'm Sabyasachi, joining from Calcutta. I first would like to congratulate LawSikho for providing me this opportunity, and thank you, Ramanuj, for arranging such a session on the very relevant topic. And I'm a lawyer practicing in High Court Calcutta, and due to this lockdown, prolonged lockdown which is going on, I am gaining a little bit experience in online matters before the High Court regarding Corona. As all of you know that our state, West Bengal, is facing tremendous problem regarding Corona, and this disease has infected many thousands of people in the state. There are allegations, counter allegations by the state government and central government. Thousands of disputes are coming up. So it's all about a new experience we are going across. Let's see, please.
Okay.
So therefore, yeah.
Okay. So, so if you can briefly tell me, like, what are the cases you have? We will go into, like, obviously general discussion, but first, what are the matters that you have filed? It's very interesting that what kind of matters are being filed in the courts regarding Corona.
Right. So what I can start with is that when this Corona outbreak came in India and the government decided to impose lockdown in order to prevent the situation, many problems came up. The one side of problem, one batch of problems are directly related to the pandemic itself, which are problems under this, you understand that Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, we have a very colonial piece of legislation, and a set of problem which is coming up due to this Disaster Management Act. So both these acts are possibly, one is a piece of legislation passed by the Britishers in 1897. Another is the piece of legislation which is a comparatively new legislation of this particular millennium. So these two legislations, in so many places, they are in confrontation. Number two, there are the problems which are the ancillary problems to the pandemic, like problems related to the employment, problems related to workers, problem related to investment, problem related to
Yeah, Sabyasachi, we can't hear you. Are you there? We lost him. Lost Sabyasachi. Guys, can you hear me and see me? Can you inform me in the chat if you can hear me and see me? I think we have lost Sabyasachi. Yeah. Okay, so while Sabyasachi joins back, let's give him. Acha, he's muted, I think. Okay, he has joined back and he's muted. Okay. Now we are back, Sabyasachi. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, speak. We lost you because of internet problem, I think. So you are saying.
Basically, the most important thing is that the civil rights at the time of Corona, how the civil rights are going to be protected. As we see, we gather the information from various countries of the world that a trend is setting up, that a section is trying to utilize this situation as an emergency situation. And undoubtedly, this situation is an emergency situation, but not the emergency we have seen under the Constitution. So this is an emergency situation which has created a tremendous change in our civil rights mechanism throughout the country. We are accepting government's dictum. We are accepting so many instructions given by the administrative authorities, and we are confirming, we are complying with those sets of principles as directed by the government and directions as directed by the government. It may be in terms of exercise of our right to movement. It may be in terms of exercise of so many other restrictions which have been already imposed upon us. So now this has created a problem. The problem is that the forerunners of civil rights throughout the country, we were facing a trouble just before Corona regarding the, that NRC, CA and other controversies. There were thousands of cases. It is the lockdown that doesn't mean the government has stopped arresting those people. We have seen the Jamia student, the pregnant lady who has been arrested during the lockdown. You have seen the Anand Teltunde, the human rights activist, who has also been arrested during the lockdown. And when the court are deciding on the fact that whether the jail should be filled by thousands of the prisoners or not, they are trying to release the prisoners on the ground of this social distancing. A section are being still arrested intentionally, politically, and in order to create a fear, psychosis over the other people that, see, this is a situation where you should not come and protest. This is a situation you should accept the dictums of the government as the measure, emergency measure taken by them. So this is a very interesting situation, and we are at a very interesting crossroads of our constitutional rights, and the courts are dealing with those situations, and now we have to see how the courts are dealing with this situation.
Understood. So, Yuval Harari, Noah Harari, who's a leading thinker and philosopher, had said, he had predicted that around the world, this corona situation will give the governments a reason to increase surveillance on individuals. Will give them reasons to, increasingly encroach on the privacy rights of individuals, and people would be not having the same rights as they used to have unless there is some intervention. So I think that we are seeing it is playing out all over the world, of course, and especially we are seeing this in India also. But there are, so I don't want to restrict the discussion only around civil rights. There are other important decisions that are also being taken by the courts, which will have long-term impacts. So if we can start classifying the different issues, so definitely civil rights and surveillance is one issue. In fact, I heard that in Noida, they have made it mandatory that you have to download the Arogya Setu app, which tracks your whereabouts. Right. And the question remains as to how can it be made mandatory when everybody in our country does not have a phone, forget a smartphone, right? So some people have smartphone, definitely many people have smartphone, but everybody does not have, nor does government provide internet as a right to everybody. Not everybody may have internet. So how can the government ask everybody to download an app? So it's an interesting legal question as well, and obviously it has not been challenged in the courts, but remains to be seen. And also there are significant data protection issues. For example, today a hacker from some other country has been releasing data of received through Arogya Setu app on Twitter, right? So now these issues are there. Now my question is that what are the areas? So one issue I can see is that definitely people's employment and labor rights is a major area. Another area is on contracts. Apart from civil, there's an issue on contracts. How the courts have been looking at enforcement of contracts that will have a widespread impact on everything. Civil rights, fundamental rights, obviously in the same category, and there are a lot of restrictions right now on our fundamental rights. To start with, our fundamental right, like for example, freedom of movement. There's a significant restriction on that. Okay, I'm sure there freedom of assembly and freedom of associating, freedom of association.
And interestingly, Ramanuj, I will be telling you this freedom of assembly. It's very interesting concept. See, this social distancing requires certain norms to be followed. It restricts the gathering. See, now there are the things that if some people they choose to follow social distancing measure and they assemble somewhere, like we are standing in front of this PDS shops, we are standing in front of any government benefits. There are the urgent benefits. So whether this freedom of assembly itself can be waived.
Okay, understood what you're trying to say. Yeah. Understood what you're trying to say. So this is one category, definitely, that, freedom, fundamental rights and civil rights. Another area, of course, is the relationship between state and center, because we have a federal structure, quasi-federal structure, but that is upended by this law on pandemics. So suddenly the central government has disproportionate power. So one thing that we have seen in a major way is that, so for example, the states have a lot of state subjects. So for example, sale of alcohol. And the center is now telling the state whether the state can sell alcohol or not, although it is directly not impacting the pandemic, so to speak. But it is an interesting, and there would surely can be some center-state disputes, which is also people are talking about.
This relates to this federal structure or center-state relationship under the constitution at the time of pandemic. This is a new phenomenon together. What we can see that not only for this selling of alcohol, we have seen the
even policing and correct.
Central is not accepting state data. And yesterday, a very interesting thing has come. There was a litigation filed by a member of parliament, Mohua Moitra, before the Supreme Court. She prayed before the Supreme Court that this CSR fund should be given this tax exemption, which were provided to the CM's relief fund directly. They should be exempted from the taxation. So this particular thing, Supreme Court said, Madam, you should go back to the parliament and agitate the issue. And this is not the forum, appropriate forum. Now the question is that whether if some decision which appears to us very arbitrary per se, then whether we should go to parliament, we should approach the parliament or we should approach the court. So this is changing the entire discourse about the court system in India and understanding of principle of law itself. According to me, this is another phenomena which is cropping up at the time of pandemic. And issue related to job guarantee, that Narega, issue related to PDS, distribution of food rents, right to food, issue related to right to health, which is the most important thing. We are now concentrating ourselves to Corona, COVID-19. Apart from COVID-19, there are thousands of people who need medical facilities and care every day. Like a cancer patients need to get his chemo. A patient of kidney needs to be dialysis regularly. Due to the COVID-19 impact, there is a restriction now on the number of hospital beds. Now, how the right to health of other peoples will be taken care of at this time? The number of doctors are being quarantined by this time. So how they will be treated? People need to be treated, right? This pandemic is not stopping other disease to come or other patients to be like, they does not give any immunity to other patients that by this time you will not be affected by other disease. So right. By the time pandemic is over, we'll see the problem related to other disease apart from corona throughout the country. So right to health has become another issue. As you said, this Arogya app, the Arogya app is one problem regarding Arogya app is the surveillance. Another problem which has popped up by Supreme Court regarding this Ayushman Bharat. Initially they said that every private hospital will treat everybody at free of cost COVID-19 test. Now Supreme Court came up with a modification saying that no, it is those people who are already enrolled under Ayushman Bharat, they can only be tested at free of cost. So rest of the people will have to pay for their test. So this together is bringing us to before another crossroad that see, pandemic, yes, nobody is disputing that pandemic is a disaster. It is a national disaster. and nobody can blame someone for this pandemic right now. So the pandemic, everybody will have to raise a question: who is responsible to the situation, so that India is not ready to deal with this situation. So it is a question of non-dealing with the issue properly, appropriately. The plan, lack of plan.
So there are many issues. So, my
Right.
intention is not to just point out the issues, but to understand comprehensively what is the overall stance taken by the courts and what are the important, like understanding it rather than, just, pointing out issues. So let's understand it. So there are certain categories there are buckets we can say that we have identified. That one bucket is employment related issues. There's another bucket is civil rights and fundamental rights, and how do we treat in this pandemic scenario. One is obviously the center-state relationship and federal structure. That is one major area of concern. Then you can also say that what about, there'll be other issues like taxes and like these things which are not fundamental rights, but a right nonetheless of people, that they have no normal freedom that we enjoy while living. So for example, operating businesses, and then the question arises that if you have this indefinite lockdown going on and there's no clarity as to how the lockdown will be stopped, because the number of cases are not going down, they're increasing day by day. So although we have 15 more days, whatever, since 17th of May or whatever, but even then, there is no reason to believe that suddenly after 15 days, there will be less number of cases. Probably there will be more cases if you go by all indications, right? So in that case, who looks after us? So if we are not having an income, if you are not going to have, any kind of support, and the government is definitely not in a position to support all the people with food indefinitely, right? Food and other basic necessities.
Right.
So then the question will arise is that, is the lockdown even justified? And, there would be, it might be so that Supreme Court will have to decide on such, if the government is unable to decide because of political issues, then the situation may arise that Supreme Court will have to decide that whether the lockdown is justified and will be continued, or what point we say that, listen, whatever happens, we can't afford this lockdown anymore. Because anyway, people are going to die from not having access to food or like basic necessities, not having medical facilities for that matter. So if the medical facilities continue the way it is, right, it cannot go on, right? Like it cannot go on. Like, more people will die from non-COVID related lack of treatment issues rather than COVID. Okay, if you allowed COVID to spread openly, and sure, some people would die, but way more people would die if we have a lockdown going on, say 6 months or 1 year, right?
Right.
So this is the situation, and it looks increasingly likely that at some point Supreme Court will have to take a call on this. If the government may push the ball in the court, so to speak, that you decide, because we don't have the political capital or the ability to decide.
And here exactly we are seeing that approach of the court is quite unprecedented. Some courts are
Okay, we have lost Sabyasachi once more.
the courts in Calcutta, they became very active about the rights of the people from the very first day. But they came up with the decision that we will be holding online courts, and they have also arranged the online system at this.
So this is another important bucket, right, to legal services, right? So access to legal justice
because
system.
Ramanuj, yesterday one of my friend was telling a very interesting proposition. He's a lawyer. He was saying that yesterday this government has decided to open these wine shops, right? So central and states, some of the states has raised an objection to that, but most of the states, they have opened. He said that consumption of alcohol, the scientific evidence is there, it creates some social instability sometimes. So there is a problem, there may be some problem, because that's why some regulations are there. So now your courts are closed. You can only access to the court system by using your online mechanism, which is also very, very restricted now. At this point of the time, this mechanism is not very familiar to most of the lawyers in the country, where people mostly depend for their access to justice on the lawyers. Because till now, the in-person matters are less in number. It is the lawyers who assist the people in our country like us. So here, you have decided to open the wine shops, but you have decided to close the courts.
So one question is that when courts are saying that we will hear only very urgent matters. In some cases, they have in some courts they have even widened the scope. So what are the decisions on these matters? What is very urgent and what is not very urgent? And urgent?
If I start with these urgent matters, one matter you have seen that yes, importantly, court decided to hear in Calcutta the COVID-related matters. You understand the first matter which was filed by Dr. Fuad Halim. This is a matter where Dr. Fuad Halim wanted the implementation of the guidelines of ICMR in the state of West Bengal. And a very interesting proposition is that whether the state can still claim their right on this public health and try to decide on public health and take action on public health at the time of pandemic. Because pandemic is not a normal situation. It is a situation where the law has to be interpreted not only by our constitutional framework, within the constitutional framework, but also by looking at the regulations of World Health Organization. World Health Organization has directed all the states, given the way out to the countries, and the countries has adopted a policy. And World Health Organization is an organization where India is a member country and it has signed the agreement. So it has the binding effect of that agreement for India to follow those principles which has to be followed by World Health Organizations. World Health Organization have certain principles in international health regulations. And if you look at the international health regulations, India is under obligation to frame its own regulations on the basis of that, and as a result, the ICMR guidelines have been framed. But there were allegations against the West Bengal government, particularly in two respects. One, West Bengal government was not following the ICMR guidelines mandatorily, particularly while treating the COVID patients. Now, how they were admitting the COVID patients in non-COVID hospitals. Till today, it is being practiced here. They were suppressing the data. They were suppressing the data related to death, or they were altering the data. And you have seen there a lot of controversy has been cropped up between the center and state on the ground of data. Center is stating that number of death is such, state is stating some number of death is very less. So this is a very unprecedented, unexpected, and unwise confrontation we are having nowadays.
No, this is a global debate, honestly, Sabyasachi, because there are people who are asking. So what is happening is that there are comorbidity issues. A lot of people who have anyway would have died. So for example, if somebody had leukemia for that matter, and he was counting his number of his days. But then now when he's dying after an infection of COVID, the death is being recorded as a COVID death. Now the question is that should this be counted as a COVID death? Because this was a casualty anyway, right? And there are many such issues that is happening. And there's a question, this is being debated across the world, that, how to do this. And I think it is a good thing that we are having this debate. We'll have a settlement on this debate, because sometimes the media is very eager to paint every death that is happening as COVID death, right? But whereas the real cause of the death may not be COVID, and it is very easy to hype this up, and like people are sitting, it's like watching a cricket match. People are watching the number of counter going up and down, what is happening. And this is very good for media and their business, but it is not necessarily good for the country and decision making and influence of public.
And interestingly, when you taken up the issue of media, that urgent matter heard by Supreme Court was to save Arnab Goswami. One person was saved by Supreme Court by giving 2 weeks time. This is one interesting juncture where this urgency.
So this is what I want to talk about, not specifically about Arnab Goswami's case. Anyway, see, we don't want to get into we want to keep it a legal discussion rather than a political discussion. And on both sides there is very strong opinion. I have my strong opinion about it, but for the purpose of this discussion, I would prefer that we keep it on the legal stuff. So what is the Supreme Court saying about what is very urgent matter and what should get listed on an urgent basis?
I don't have any understanding about it. It's very, very arbitrary. Always the urgent matters, this identification of urgent matter, it depends on the discretion of the judge all the time. Particularly when you are going to Supreme Court or High Court under Article 32 or Article 226, you have to convince the judge that yes, this is urgent.
And there is no clear principle that is there as to what creates urgent. No, it can be. There can be a clear jurisprudence developed on what is urgent.
It is the jurisprudence which has to be developed by the practice. What we normally do is try to create a situation that if the court do not intervene, there will be the irreparable loss and injury. That is the principle what we know, we read in this civil laws discourse, that irreparable loss and injury. And that irreparable loss and injury has to be the major concern.
But you are saying that Supreme Court at recent times has not given any clear indication on what is very urgent and what is not.
I did not find, because before coming here, I was going through some of the Supreme Court judgments recently passed. It says that it records that yes, this matter is taken up. Because once the matter is taken up on board, you do not have this, it is urgent. It has to be construed, it is urgent. And who is deciding it? It is the registry which is deciding whether it is urgent or not. You are filing it online.
Yeah, so we had lost you for a moment. Now you're back. Yeah, we can hear you now. So this is one point of it. I think this is something that I believe that the courts will have to decide soon. Even the High Courts will probably create a jurisprudence around what is very urgent in such situation. And I think because we are going to have this scenario for a while, even if lockdown is lifted, the courts to return to normalcy might take a long time. And it would certainly go on for a while. And we are not very clear as to how long it will take for the courts to start hearing matters in a normal matter, whether online or offline. It is probably going to take a while before courts return to normal functioning. So in that light, this might be a very important decision, and all of our other rights pretty much depend on this one right: access to the court and access to, on what gets classified as very urgent matter that should be heard during this pandemic, and what can be shelved for future.
Yes, this is one. And another thing I'll tell you, that this classification between urgent matter and, you see, every matter is urgent. It depends on the perspective of the person who is going before the court. Keep it in your mind that he has only one case. The court might have thousands of cases. Court might be flooded up with the cases, but that person, the poor person or individual who is coming before the court, he has only one case. His dispute. So according to him, his dispute is very urgent. According to the court, it might not be very urgent. So when the proposition is like this, so it is bound to be arbitrary. So having a clear-cut formula to decide what is urgent, what is not, it requires the judges to apply his wisdom to whether to satisfy that, where they record the satisfaction, how it is urgent. Like I'm telling you, the reason may be urgency in case of a this anticipatory bill. It is always urgent because some people are under under a situation where people think that they can be arrested at any point of the time by the police. If there is no support, there is no immunity given by the court to save that person for that particular period of time. We see that I was telling you that at the very beginning, that during the lockdown, the courts have decided to make the prisoners free, most of the prisoners. But till today, people are being arrested under various causes, under various acts, even under for the crimes. You have seen this Jamia incident. You have seen other incidents. People are being arrested. So where are their remedies lies? Their remedy lies before the court. So that is the case of extreme urgency, and those matter has to be taken. Once anticipatory bail is filed for the court, court has to take up the matter. Court should not wait for the another that person to be arrested, and court should not wait.
Fine, but this I understand. I understand your argument, but at the end of the day,
Yes.
this is not clear right now from the stance. Like the courts do not have a clear stance on this, and that is something that has to be decided clearly in the coming days. I believe that is definitely a challenging issue that that we are going to face. So that brings me to the other very important issue that what is going to be the rights of employees and employers. Both sides there's a problem. On one hand, employers are under distress because government is saying that you must pay a salary, you cannot fire people. Okay, and there have been threats issued that if you don't pay people salary, you will be arrested. We'll start legal proceedings against you. Now, on the other hand, government is also not allowing those businesses to function normally, and obviously for good reasons we understand. But how does, I mean, you see, there are big businesses who have deep pockets, I understand, but a lot of businesses are very small businesses. Imagine there's a small shop or some. Normally, even I run a business, and normally we do not have money for more than 1 month or 2 months at most that we can pay people salary without, when we don't have any income. So most businesses run this way, right? That there are some businesses which have extremely deep pockets. They can run maybe for 6 months without making any revenue and still keep paying salaries. But that is not the case. I'm sure that, I'll hazard a guess that 90% of businesses would not have that kind of coffers that they'll keep paying salary without receiving any revenue. So, and if even if they are allowed to operate their business, logic dictates that there will be lack of demand because the entire economy seems to be depressed in a way. People don't have demand, so a lot of businesses will be losing a massive amount of business and will struggle to generate revenue. Now, can the government ask them to continue to pay? That is one question. On the other hand, the problem remains from the employee's side that suddenly my job goes away. At least under the law, certain things are guaranteed, that I will be given a notice pay, or for layoff, there are certain rights under the Factories Act or Industrial Disputes Act. Retrenchment, there are certain rights that they have. But of course, if the business goes bankrupt, then there is no question of anybody being able to pay. On the other hand, courts have shown maturity in this way that they are not taking decisions that may send a business into bankruptcy. They have been holding it off. A lot of bank guarantees, a lot of letter of credits have been postponed by the courts, saying that there's a 90-day moratorium on this, etc. In some cases, shares were not allowed to be sold, when pledged shares were not allowed to be sold in the market, given that suddenly there's a huge depression in prices of shares in the share market. So selling it off right now cause a lot of
now, this is very interesting thing which has come up. I think possibly the proposition we were relying upon from the very beginning, that who is responsible to deal with the situation. See, we expect all the time. Let me start from the a notion that state is the custodian of the public health, and particularly person should be treated for right to health.
But even state does not have money right now. The reality is that state's incomes have been carteled to a great deal.
I think we should, jurisprudence has to be developed regarding this particular.
But can jurisprudence even solve this problem? Something has to be developed. But when there is no money, then jurisprudence is not going to create money.
The problem can only be solved. I think the Professor Abhijit Vinayak Banerjee has already proposed that if you also don't have money, you just print the money and give it to the people. That is one solution. I will tell you, Ramanuj, the thing has to be sorted out in this way, that you have seen that 29th of March, government came up with a notification. Just it was after declaration of the lockdown. In the notification, government said that no, this landlord will throw away his tenants during this period of time. And I think Chief Justice Bobde has also referred to that notification sometimes, that it is also a case where you are not being thrown away, or you are not being outstated from your place where you are staying, from your accommodation. This during the lockdown period. It says that no person should be retrenched during the lockdown period and every person should get their salary.
And that made sense. When the lockdown was for 15 days, 1 month, 1.5 months, people could still say that,
in reality, it is being faced by many people. Like I met some of the IT employees, and due to my this professional work, I had to advise them. So I'm telling you, these IT employees are being threatened that yes, we are not throwing you away for this during the lockdown period, but don't expect your job to be continued after lockdown. Once the lockdown is over, you are gone. We are not going to continue with the business. So this is a peculiar situation where the role of the state has to be increased, and the state should come up to revive the economy. You cannot expect one individual to contribute 100% for this revival of this economy after this lockdown. It is the duty of the state, and it is also the duty of the state to maintain the balance. What we are seeing, we are not. The trend is the government is saying that we need to work. Yes, fine, we need to work, but at the same time, there has to be the money in the hand of the people to access the market. Otherwise, the situation will be very bad after the lockdown. You know that we have the situation, we have seen that we have the money, but and things are there in the market, demands are there. However, due to the lack of money, the things cannot be purchased and market cannot be accessed. That is a problem that will put us at this stalemate situation.
So it is said that 80 to 90% of India's workforce is employed by SMEs. Okay, so small and medium enterprises, right. And small and medium enterprises are facing a wipeout situation right now. Certainly, they are not in position to pay people. They have paid till even April, but in May, I don't think even some people have not been able to pay April salary also, and definitely most of them will not be able to pay a salary in May, since they have not been functioning. And it's not like the day they open their business. Let's say they're allowed after 15 days to operate. It's not like the business is going to come back. It will take a while to come back.
And it will take time because 2 months, 3 months, you are not in a work. And there was no accessibility of the market in 3 months. Because today, if the government decides to open, you cannot go away with the rules of social distancing.
So it looks like the government is not going to really start arresting people and enforce this law. That doesn't look like a probable situation, because that would lead to that would be very counterproductive. Basically,
catastrophic.
So there wouldn't be any jobs, right? To start with, if it's one thing you didn't get paid for 1 month, but to have no jobs when there's no. In fact, employees are very forthcoming right now. In many cases, they are ready to take a pay cut to save the company so that they have a job when this is lifted.
And the proposition, that one of the leading industrialists of our country says that yes, there will be pay cut of the employees after the lockdown, but even I am ready to sacrifice my whole salary.
His salary doesn't matter. It's not comparable, right? So
uneven system.
If I don't draw a salary for 6 months, I'll be fine. After that, I'll have to worry. But that is
But a person who depends on a 15,000 rupees salary or 20,000 rupees salary, it is everything for him.
Correct.
And this moratorium has to be connected with this EMI moratorium that what RBI has given. See, it is not the waiver of 3 months EMI. Get 3 more taken as a waiver. The moratorium should not be treated as a waiver of the loan. The term has to be increased. So this is also this liability. If they are not waived from their loan liability to repay the EMI for these 3 months, as I was telling you, I am not responsible for this pandemic, so you are not responsible for pandemic, and its citizens are not responsible for pandemic, not the government. But it was the duty of the government to be ready with the situation to deal with the catastrophe.
No, so that is fine. But the question is that what do we do now? Like, I know we are interested in deciding how courts will look at it, but so far it looks like courts are taking a sympathetic view to businesses and as well to the employees, and trying, basically the courts are not deciding anything. As far as the employer-employee relation, they're basically avoiding the question altogether.
And another thing, court is saying that yes, you are provided with food. Yes, for the time being, you shut up and sit down. We will decide later. Let's see. So court
later on, what is to be done? Let's see. Right.
Let's see what happens.
Right. So for the time being, as long as let's see what happens. So we'll see that later. So exactly. So it's a deferment of the decision of the court. So this is interesting, and probably they don't have an option also other than this, because what are they going to fix the liability, or nothing seems practical. So this is very interesting. The other point is that we'll definitely see a huge number of banking loan defaults, and the very interesting thing is that Indian industry was already reeling under bad debt. Not only the banks, even the industry, right? So we have had 900 companies which are facing bankruptcy, and these are 900 big companies which are facing bankruptcy. I just saw in chat somebody was saying that there are big businesses, they should at least pay. But in reality, the finances and the books of the big businesses is quite bad. They are not in no position to pay. Big businesses also have big liabilities, right? And they are in no position to keep paying. Not everybody, we can't generalize, but at least there's a huge percentage of big companies which are not in a position to, they are in a difficulty already, and after the pandemic, they have gotten a body blow. So now it will be very difficult, and we'll certainly see a lot of banking decisions. So it's I think government has already led the public policy by making it clear that they don't want bankruptcies right now. Primary motive is to prevent bankruptcies. Let the businesses be there. If they're standing when this is all over, then there's a chance that jobs will come back, businesses will be brought back. But if we just let everything go bankrupt, anyway nothing works. So I think the courts will be following the government's lead on those lines.
Right. That
bankruptcy case.
The bankruptcy cases bankruptcy cases looking from a person, I would say that a creditor's point of debtor's point of view, corporate debtor's point of view, this is very lucrative code actually. However, when it is applied at a general situation like not a general situation, this emergency situation like this, there will be a problem. It will create a stalemate in the relationship and the day-to-day work of the company. Because as you said correctly, that it is not a question of generalization. Nobody is generalizing. A small company cannot be equated with a big company. There may be thousands of reasons why a company is.
No, there are big companies with really big problems also. There are big companies with really big problems also. So,
and in most of the time, courts are interested to solve those problems essentially. And now I'll tell you the reason. This thing should be, I think there has to be a moratorium for a particular period of time over the operation of this kind of laws, so that there can be, and these company courts, NCLTs particularly, they should be directed to deal with the employer-employees issues and to save the employees for the time being and save the company for the time being. Let them run and let them feed themselves. That is first thing. If they die, they cannot run the company. It is applicable for the employer and employees both. I am telling you, in small companies, an employee and employer, there are a lot of responsibility which belongs to the employer also. And it is also not possible for him to carry on the business. And most of the time, they will face a trouble to maintain those, comply with those orders. It is basically the government which has to come between. And it is the duty of the government should frame the guidelines. And ultimately, it is the duty of these tribunals to apply it cogently, so that there can be a balance drawn between these two conflicts, these conflicting areas. And that can only solve the problem. Otherwise, Ramanuj, there will be a problem in this coming future after the lockdown. The people will not only lose their job, because they are losing their job, will not waive their liabilities to pay EMI. And they will not only lose their job, they will lose the money, and they will have no other option except committing suicides. This creates a problem.
At least it will lead to mass bankruptcy, and people would be like
mass bankruptcy, and I'll tell you a
complete loss of faith in the entire economic system, because people won't be able to deal with each other.
If you ask me honestly, I will say that the role of judiciary itself, particularly under our constitutional system, it is very restricted and limited. It cannot be like, because judiciary is, as Chief Justice Bobde has also in a telephonic interview with The Hindu on 21st April has said that 26th April said that this is the time where court has particularly exactly no role to play, because mere recognition of the right will not solve the problem. Mere recognition of the right will not solve the problem.
Court can pass an order. How will you enforce it? So that is the problem.
Who will enforce it if there is no practicality to that enforcement? That is the problem. And everything is connected. So pandemic is connected with health. Health is connected with your right to life. Right to life is connected with your right to movement. Right to movement is connected with right to freedom of assembly. That is connected with your right to continue in an employment. Together creates an internet situation in India. So everything is connected together, since from pandemic to your daily wage. So once this is a connected situation, it has to be solved from a holistic approach by a government accepting the advice of the international institutions and advisors, economic advisors, and as like the great personalities, Nobel laureates like Abhijit Binayak Banerjee and others said. So the government should accept those proposals, and that IRS.
Yeah, so that is an executive function. That is an executive function. Really, we are not in a position. Courts are definitely not intervening at this point into that. But one thing that will be very interesting, that it is almost looks certain, at least to me, that going forward, if the government does not lift the lockdown soon, the ball may be in the court to decide whether Supreme Court may have to decide that how lockdown will be lifted. And that will be a very interesting situation. I'm sure that Supreme Court is not looking forward to that day, but it might be so that the government may have to rely on the Supreme Court to lift the lockdown.
It will be true then, as it happened in Hungary. During the COVID-19, the government has decided. They said that now we are taking up. It is the emergency power. Let's COVID goes, then we'll return you back the power. So that situation we do not expect, and we are not expecting Supreme Court to decide, at least on this point. That would create another problem.
No, it may very well come, because it has happened earlier. Also, Supreme Court has decided, like for example, in Delhi, when LNG was liquefied natural gas was implemented, it should have been a decision of the executive, but it was done by the judiciary and implemented by the judiciary. We saw the same thing in NRC. That NRC was it could ideally, it is a law and should be implemented that way, but it was implemented based on a Supreme Court diktat, right? So this is going to happen probably here also. I mean, it has been seen in India whenever the government finds it hard to take a decision, and that a decision is going to be unpopular. No way, like this way also unpopular, that way also unpopular. It is left to the courts to decide. Yeah. So I think there may be a situation. So what do you think could be the jurisprudence that the court will rely on in that case?
See, the court's jurisprudence should be based on the constitution, and liberty of the people has to be given the most important importance over everything, and citizens' right has to be protected. But as you said that the populism, you have used the word that either way it is not going to be popular mode, whatever court decides. Court should decide in accordance with law. That is most important thing. The role of the court is to uphold the rule of law, not applying the new jurisprudence at this juncture. not applying a new things, not applying a new direction, not giving any new direction, kind of, which is not possible to implement, but to apply the rule of law, uphold the liberty of the people, and decide the cases. And another approach the court should have to adopt, I think, this is the interpretation of the international health regulations also. How the health regulations need to be interpreted. Our interpretation of statutes and the traditions of interpretation of statutes, we have learned it was very, we had a very restrictive approach that civil things has to be interpreted in this fashion, taxation law has to be interpreted in this fashion, and criminal law has to be interpreted in such fashion. But it is the subject-oriented law has to be interpreted in such fashion as to be decided by the court. Like the health statute cannot be the interpretation of health statutes cannot be the rule of interpretation of the municipal statute. So this area where the the more expert opinions which are also required, the how to deal with this pandemic situation, this cannot be done by the court alone. You need experts, you need medical persons, and medical persons includes a virologist to epidemiologist. You need an economist to deal with the situation.
Got
and
it.
everything
Understood.
come together.
So in your opinion, what have been, say, top 5 important decisions of the Supreme Court and High Courts in the last couple of months?
One decision I will tell you that first decision was most important major decision was that the testing decision related to testing, that everybody has a right to test. This is also a very interesting thing that Supreme Court has dealt with. However, there was a modification. That was a restriction that yes, if you are like Ayushman Bharat, then only you can do. However, that was definitely that has created a situation of the person is feeling that I have a right to be tested. Whether I have a carrier of COVID, I can go and do that. That is one. Number two, the decision of the Supreme Court, at least Supreme Court is reiterating on the government circular on protection of the employment and salary. However, the practical situation is quite different. But Supreme Court, as till today, has not said that employers have no responsibility towards the employee. At least they have not reversed that position. Sometimes, the Supreme Court.
So government position has been upheld that, okay, for the time being, you
so far that
to keep paying. Yeah.
At least that has been a relief to us. Third decision, which I think I personally do not support the proposition, but I think which will have a huge impact over the country's economy and the banking system, which has come yesterday, that is the application of SURFACE Act on the cooperative banks. You understand, the cooperative banks, particularly these banks are established under a particular regulations and with a object to create more empowerment amongst the people, particularly people of downtrodden people and the people who believes in the cooperative systems. And this application of SURFACE will possibly lead to a situation where the people, poor people, will have to face all the draconian decisions of SURFACE most of the times. Cooperative banks have very small, they lend small amount of loans to a poor person. So this is a judgment which will have a constitutional bench judgment, which may have an adverse impact over the society in future. This is
no, but otherwise, so that is what you're saying. But at the same time, if this was not done at the rate at which cooperative banks are going bankrupt at the moment, people are losing their life savings. So at least,
true, I'll tell you, there were the other mechanisms. Yes, that can be a debate. There are other mechanisms to deal with. It is always better to develop a system rather going away from the system itself. So this is a position because cooperative system, our constitution has adopted the cooperative principle, the history behind it. And that we should not come away from that principle. That is something, according to me, is. Now, another thing, Ramanuj, I am telling you that we should have discussed, but I forgot to discuss. that is relation to the decisions related to the education matters, because the people who are losing their time to attend the classes, starting from a kid to higher education person. See, online mode, suddenly you are giving online mode. It may be a pro tem solution of the problem, but cannot be a permanent solution to the problem. And the kids who are losing their substantial time of age of their life, where they should have been educated by the educational institution, who are protecting right to education has to be protected. This is very important.
What is the solution? You can't ask like what is the solution? You can't do it.
You have to, because most of the schools, they have not yet introduced online system. At least every school, including the government school, should impose these guidelines. They should frame a guidelines to start online system, because some schools, private schools, they have adopted, but it should be ensured for all children. This education has to be given, that they should create an environment. Another thing is I will tell that court has really come up for the protection of certain civil rights also by this time, like the Prashant Bhushan's and others. They are also protected by the Supreme Court for a case which were lodged against them. And certainly that so many courts have also passed orders under the sitting on bail or anticipatory bail jurisdictions protecting liberty of the people and right to health also. In Calcutta, a major decision which has come up, that court said that yes, by this time everybody has a right to help, and government should come up with the report of the testing report, because once you are recognizing that you have a right to be tested, then you have to show that what is the implementation of that. At least the court can be a place to use the access the information about the real picture. But I think the court should also take a serious note on 2-3 issues where they are lacking. One is that PM care funds matter. Another is that CSR fund, Mahua Moitra's matter yesterday, that they should have been more active on this issue, whether this fund should be exempted or not. This is a dispute between central and state. And thirdly, they should actually go away with the concept of locus standi. They should be very liberal on the concept of locus standi at this juncture, because this is a situation where many people cannot access to the court, but they can come and approach the court by his friend also. So let there be a mechanism to do that, because we are not filing vakalatnama nowadays. We are exempted. We are giving an undertaking that after reopening will submit the vakalatnama and court fees. So actually court should be very liberal on the issue of locus standi.
Got it. Okay, so you're almost over with this. Are there any cases that are important that are currently being heard in the Supreme Court or in any other high courts that you're aware of that you think could have a big impact?
See, there are many cases. As I said, that most of the cases have not yet been decided, which were filed after COVID. The judgment has to be, it is only the notice which has been, either the notice has been sent or some interim order, some sort of interim order has been issued. So it is not, it has to be, most of the cases has to be heard. And possibly the Supreme Court or High Courts are trying to give an interim relief to the people, at least for the time being. They will have to decide on the issue in future. I will not particularly mention any case, but some judgments which have come, like Sarfisi judgment it was being heard for a long time. The decision has come. And like that, many other decisions, there are other decisions came, the hearings were over by this time. So there was no pandemic at that point of time. So I will not say that, but another thing, court should look into the right to internet, free access to internet. As you said that
Setu app, yeah.
If you make it, the court should hold that access to internet is a fundamental right. without holding it a fundamental right, you cannot say that accessing this app is mandatory. I am not touching the issue of surveillance. That is a different issue. And court should protect, because you know that, as Yuval Noah Harari has said, that this is a phenomena where the surveillance, the fear of surveillance is not only the fear of surveillance over the skin, but also under the skin surveillance. You are using so many things, instruments, software, whatsoever, where you are collecting the information which is there under the skin, right?
Right. I think it will be, right now very hard for any court or a government. Like everybody is going to take a very precautionary approach, because if the point is simple, if what do you like, what do people care? I mean, we live by the will of people in this country, right? So if people are okay with an app, okay, which is going to open up the economy, and people can actually if they believe that this app is going to save us and it is going to open up the economy, we'll get our jobs back, you can't stop people from having the app, right? So, and you can't stop government from implementing if it is a solution. We don't know. Right. It's all in the air. But I don't think courts will come in the way of that. I mean, that's not how things look like at the moment, nor do it looks like, I mean, government can always legislate. It hasn't legislated till date, but if government goes and legislate, you can stop it from doing so. And
right.
Whether you are going to read down the law based on a fundamental right, it will anyway take a long time to happen. It's not going to happen.
It has to take time, because otherwise it is difficult.
That is difficult. So anyway, immediate. Right. So it's an immediate solution.
Cannot solve the problem.
Correct.
And it is impossible.
Right. So anyway, very difficult times, and difficult for the court also. I'm sure the court's job is not easy at all these days. Neither is it for lawyers, but
lawyers are also starving. They are struggling, right?
Yes.
There are matters filed by the lawyers that provide a certain amount of that assistance. Bar Council should provide assistance to the lawyers. The matters have been filed. They should open that lawyers' welfare fund, because lawyers, not only the people who are well placed and big rich persons. There are people who are financially weak also.
Okay, so there is a bunch of questions on on EMI that I can see in the chat. If anybody wants to ask any question live, please raise your hand. There's a option to raise your hand. You can do that. Otherwise, if you want to come, you want to ask any questions, we can take a couple of questions. There's a question about EMIs. So the question is that if I am the sole breadwinner in the family, can I stop paying EMIs right now? You have to, I believe you have to apply to your bank for this.
Yes.
You contact your bank, talk to your bank.
Some of the banks, they have automatically stopped it. Some of the banks, they have not. They said that the RBI circular requires that you have to contact. That is always better to take note that you should contact with the bank.
Contact the bank and say that I want to stop paying. I want a moratorium. I'll pay afterwards.
That's the only thing.
And you must do that. Okay. So, Bajaj Finance, penal interest of unpaid installment. But there would be any penal interest because of the Supreme Court order. Okay. Interest will continue to accrue, not penal interest. The normal interest, normal interest that was already there would continue to accrue. Okay, so you can pay a little later. Okay. So, are there any other questions? I don't think anybody has any questions. We can, in that case, wrap up. So, any parting message?
Yeah.
Any parting message, Sabyasachi?
Any
parting message? What is your final?
My message would be like that stay safe for the time being, and we should be very careful about what is happening in our surrounding. Let us open our ear and let us open our mind and think about the situation. We at least got some time to introspect ourselves. Why we are not ready to deal with this pandemic kind of situations. If we can learn from these situations, and then we can, in future, we will not repeat this problem, and we will be able to solve this problem. And regarding the our life, right to life, that has to be protected. Suddenly the people are facing the trouble. The pandemic has attacked the world suddenly, but the human beings are also not ready to face the problem. And let's take a lesson from the countries who are solving the problem and who have failed to deal with the problem. It is not a time to shifting the burden or criticizing someone, but it is the time to introspect ourselves and think for a better policy.
We always look at the court to give a solution. Like, court will do justice. This is one situation where court has no power to do justice most of the time. Court has no, even if court gives you the order you want, you probably will not be able to go and enforce it, because who's going to, if you are an employee and you say that I have got a judgment against my employer, now pay me. The employer is out of business. There's nothing you can do. He's bankrupt. What will you do?
Possibly the reason why court is very much restrictive about the execution itself. They said that it's not the time for execution.
No execution. Right. So it's like court is pushing everybody towards negotiation, mediation, and you're forced, because court is not going to do anything. You are forced to go for mediation.
I just saw somebody was typing that they should insist on ADR, alternative dispute, make a resolution in a post-COVID situation. See, ADR...
It is not post, it is already happening. It is already happening. It's already happening. Loan restructuring has already started. For all banks that do restructuring.
ADR
loans.
Situations, you can already, but it can be availed. But that is also those areas where it can be. But many places where the ADR is not a solution also.
Not a solution, because ultimately economy, there has to be money in the economy. There has to be money with the businesses. Then only you can expect. This is, otherwise no court order can save you, right? So this is the situation.
Right.
So let's hope the lockdown lifts soon and the economy comes back to its,
and people are safe.
Better health and people are safe. Okay. All the best, everybody. Thank you so much, Sabyasachi, for joining us and sharing your insights. Take care. Thank you.